Welcome to part 4. I'm well rested from a good night's sleep, and I've already put the head back onto the engine after retrieving my rogue Allen wrench. I decided to put the spark plugs in the spark plug holes as a safety measure to prevent the same type of ordeal from happening again. After I installed the head, I started working on installing the carburetors. I've got one of them on so far. It's the front mounted carburetor, and I'm about to mount the second one. Before I mount the carburetor to the engine, I'm going to clean both the manifold and the carburetor with lacquer thinner so that the gasket mating surfaces are clean and will provide a good seal. I don't want any vacuum leaks. They cause the engine to run lean and will cause me all sorts of havoc. Next, I will place the gasket. I'll also clean off the carburetor and place the carburetor onto the engine. To finish securing this carburetor, I just need to tighten up the mounting nuts. I now have both carburetors mounted to the engine, and I have a helpful tech tip for you. In order to get to the back bolt for this carburetor right here, I had to remove some of the throttle linkage, which you can't really see back here. I'll show you on this carburetor, which is just another one I had laying around. I had to remove some of this stuff so I could access the mounting bolt, which was right here. And when I was taking off this nut, even though I tried so carefully to catch it in my hand, it fell down into the bottom of the boat here underneath this engine plate, rendering it unretrievable. So my tech tip for you is, if that happens, especially if it's something that's not magnetic like a brass nut, which is what that was, you can tip the machine up by lifting on the tongue here, which is what I did, and I just lifted it up so that the craft was this way, and I shook it around a little bit, and sure enough, when I was done and I set the trailer back down, the nut was nestled right in here. So I successfully reclaimed it. Now I've got my throttle cable hooked up along with the oil injection cable. I didn't know how to adjust the oil injection pump, and it was important to me to find that out because too little oil can ruin an engine. And what I read online was that there's a mark on the oil injection pump and on the actuator arm that moves as you activate the throttle. And I have a mirror here in the hole, as you can see, and it's reflecting on the oil injection pump. And you can see the little marks right there. Those are supposed to line up at idle. See, when you give it gas, it moves forward, and then you let off, and the marks are supposed to line up. It looks like it might be just a little bit advanced, which means it might give a little bit extra oil, but that's fine with me. So that's how the oil injection pump is adjusted on these 1990s Seadoos. And to actually make the adjustment on the cable here, you can see there's an adjustment down here, and that's on the carburetor, the throttle actuator arm. So I think the next thing I need to do is throw a battery in it and see if I get spark, and then we'll cross our fingers and see if it runs. I've got the fuel lines hooked up with the exception of this return line. I think I'm going to turn the engine over until fuel comes out of there to verify that the fuel pump is working, and then hook up the return line and see if I can't get some fire in the hole. I've got the battery installed, and I believe I have spark at the spark plugs. I dumped a little bit of oil in the cylinders, that's what you see shooting back up there along with that spark. So I think I've spark, hopefully it's at the right time. Now let's get some gas to it and see what happens. I have some pre-mixed gas in the gas tank and oil in the oil tank, and I've got this return line off of the carburetor, as I mentioned earlier, and I've cycled the engine enough that now some gasoline should be coming out. So that means that the fuel pump is working. I'll just install this line right here, and with some coercion it should start. Hey, that was quick. Running the Seadoo for a few minutes. In fact, I hooked it up to the water hose to cool the engine so I could run the engine for an extended period of time. And although it ran consistently, I wasn't really happy with the way it was running. When I put it together the first time, I installed the original carburetors that went to this engine, which were the SPX carburetors. So I thought maybe because of this aftermarket pipe, it required the carburetors and the jetting that was in the carburetors that were on the engine that came out of this one, the bad engine. So I switched the carburetors around, and I think it runs quite a bit better. So it's getting dangerously close to seeing some water action. There's quite a bit of smoke because I have pre-mixed gasoline at about 32:1 ratio, and I have the oil injection running, so there's no risk of lack of lubrication in this engine. I found a couple of other things that were interesting while I was running the engine and getting it fine-tuned for its debut trip out on the water. This oil line was cracked, I think just from old age, and I think that's probably pretty typical of these lines. I might end up replacing all of these oil lines as a preventative measure, but I probably won't, because I don't want them to crack and leak oil all over the place. For the time being, I just cut out the damaged portion, and there was enough extra to just hook right into the oil tank. I also salvaged a latch mechanism for the bonnet here off of my organ donor. The original latch was really cracked and worn out, so now we have a nice working one. And by my calculations, I think, although it isn't pretty and I probably should do a few other maintenance items, it's late August and temperatures are getting cool, and I'm going to try this thing out on the lake. So the next time you see me, I'm either going to be zipping around on this thing or perhaps stranded and being towed in. But either way, it should be fun. Thanks for watching.